Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, I wanted to kick things off, obviously, talking about the Stevens Initiative, which you're the executive director of. And I want to just discuss a little bit about what the program is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Stevens Initiative is a virtual exchange program for young people across the Americas, the Middle East, and North Africa. And just if you could explain a little bit what sort of opportunities the program provides and how might that foster global understanding?
Yeah. Well, when I look at this world, I think we can all recognize how complex and extraordinary it is. And it's really difficult for just people in general to navigate. And I think young people have so much to offer to the conversation. And I think it's our responsibility at the Stevens Initiative to help them find their voice, help them find their purpose, and figure out what makes them excited and like what are they interested in, what are their passions, and to bring them together across cultures and across continents through virtual exchange where they're having the opportunity to really connect with each other. The Stevens Initiative is a leader in virtual exchange. So think of it as opening a window to the world, but from your classroom or from your home. And so because we're bringing young people together from really diverse places, they're really expanding their view of the world. They're gaining friendships. They're learning to communicate across cultures. And those are just really important pieces that have to be there for young people to begin to foster empathy for each other, to begin to build understanding, and to kind of take their path to become global citizens of the world. And so for us, it is important as education and learning. That's what we do, but it's also so much more than that because what we're doing is making the world better, one conversation at a time, one virtual exchange at a time. And it's really rewarding because the young people who participate in our programs, we're seeing them become global citizens and we're seeing them see the world with a new and different perspective, with an appreciation for differences just as much as the similarities that they have.
And I was reading somewhere that only 10% of current college students, and even less for younger students,
Gosh.
have access or are going on study
Yeah.
abroads. How is the Stevens Initiative reaching out to students that may come from low income communities or might otherwise not have the tech, the
Yeah.
Wi Fi to engage in these
Yeah.
programs?
I mean, it's core to what we do because we're using technology. And I don't want to get stuck on the tech here,
Right.
but we have to recognize that technology has the ability to reach far into those communities who are typically underrepresented. Their voice are not brought into conversations around politics or world affairs. I mean, in the US, what does diplomacy really mean to someone? And I think
Right.
for most Americans and most young people around the world, it's so inaccessible to them. So how can virtual exchange bring global learning and global education into communities who are typically do not have opportunities to participate in those conversations? And what we see in these exchange programs is that young people are coming together, they're communicating across different cultures, they're working on really cool, innovative projects that are meant to really solve some of the greatest challenges of our times. And they're realizing I can make a difference, right?
Right.
I'm reminded of a high school participant who participated in a virtual exchange program. He's from Texas
Okay.
and participated, who's from a remote area in Texas, right? And so remote areas, they're usually not a part of these conversations. And he realized through his virtual exchange the power of his voice and the power of sharing his stories from his diverse communities with his peers across different countries, and saw how just like being really authentic and sharing those voices and uplifting the voices from his community could have a transformational effect on the local community on a global scale as well. So it's taking the idea of diplomacy and really creating a space where young people can be diplomats in their own communities. And that's creating access through the opportunity of virtual exchange and what it does.
And so much of this is focused obviously on vast global issues, but you keep
Yeah.
talking also about the individual voice, local diplomacy.
Yeah.
How does the Initiative balance the global and the local?
Yeah.
And is
Yeah.
local still important nowadays?
Yes, it absolutely is important. I mean, everything that we see happening in this world, we know this as adults, that everything is so interconnected. And I think what we want young people to kind of understand and see is that the local issues and the actions that you can take in your own community have an impact on a global scale. And the reverse is also true as well, right? They're interconnected. I'm also reminded of like a really incredible story. It's sort of the transformational power of what virtual exchange really is. Two participants, one, her name is Jamila from Morocco, the other is Mariella from New York. They participated in a virtual exchange program and they realized that they had a shared passion for climate and sustainability and environment. And even though they were from different cultures and, from different places, they realized we have so much to learn from each other because the way climate action shows up in their cities, one in Tangier and one in New York City, is very, very different.
Right.
Right. But we have a lot to learn from each other. So let's make something happen. They created their own virtual exchange program. So participants
Wow.
of a virtual exchange program said, we have more to share, we have more to do. Let's bring in our own communities and the young people in our communities and let's make a virtual exchange. And they created these online sessions. They brought in these global speakers who are leading these community-based efforts in their own communities to talk about how young people can get engaged in climate action. And I mean, even that in itself is like so extraordinary. I mean, that's really what virtual exchange is about. It's about finding passion, empowering young people, inviting them to take action and supporting them along the way. But they didn't stop there. They were like, you know what? There's so much more we can do with this. Why don't we do an in-person session in our own cities?
Wow.
So they created a 3-day boot camp, right? A 3-day boot camp in Tangier in New York City, successfully designed it, developed it. It had a community-focused sort of learning element, a service day orientation to it as well. And that is it's phenomenal and it's extraordinary. Not just what they did, but think about what it took to just make it happen.
Right.
Communicating their different perspectives, aligning their goals, communicating across different languages, figuring out what speakers they wanted, agreeing on the speakers, or the trust that must have been there for one of them to come and say, I have this really wild idea. Why don't we do something that's in person? And to know that there would be this openness from, Jamila to say it to Mariella, like, let's make this happen. So I think it speaks to the trust and the friendships that are being formed in a virtual exchange, but also the impact that can have kind of within the community. And also in analyzing it from a global level as well, right? How those issues are connected.
And the Stevens Initiative was founded in 2015, correct?
Correct, 2015. Yep.
And-
Coming up our 10 year in
Oh, very
2025. Yes.
Is there a big celebration for the 10 year?
You bet. Yeah, there's gonna be. Absolutely. You better believe it. You're invited.
Oh,
yes.
brilliant.
Okay.
Oh, brilliant. I'll be there. So from there, though, a lot has changed over the past 10 years. We've
It
had
has.
a pandemic, in case you haven't noticed. And
Yes.
the world's become more polarized. We have
Yep.
large conflicts. How is this Stevens Initiative navigating these, increasingly, some might call it antagonistic worldviews?
Yes.
That trust that you were talking about.
I mean, it goes back to the heart of why the Stevens Initiative exists. We're the lasting tribute to Ambassador Christopher Stevens. He was a U.S. diplomat, and he spent a lot of his career in the Middle East and North Africa. What he really believed in was the passion of learning. He believed in that. He had a passion for learning. He was really curious about the world, and he really believed in the power of communication and that it could have a transformative power. And he wanted to take time to get to know the person he was talking to. So he dedicated his life to building bridges across difference and across cultures. And we take the spirit of that and wanting to work towards mutual understanding, no matter what our differences are, to really understand how can we show up together in community to solve these challenges. But it really begins with the idea of building a relationship and building a friendship with someone. And that's what the ambassador was about. And we carry that thread through everything that we do. And I would say, more importantly, the young people who might be experiencing this divisiveness in their own communities are also seeing, again, how they can show up and they can be inspired through the conversations they're having with someone who seems so vastly different from them, and realizing we have a lot of similarities here, but also the differences that we have, let's celebrate those too. So again, I think it comes up in building a relationship and being willing to have a conversation. And that's something Ambassador Stevens believed in. We have that show up in our work, and we definitely see it in our participants too, that inspiration that they can kind of make a change.
On that decisiveness, are there conversations being had at the Stevens Initiative that talk about, because I know there are participants coming from Israel, from the Palestinian territories, from Yemen, about those particular crises and about ongoing humanitarian efforts on the ground?
They do show up in our conversations, and I would say on a broader scale globally, I would see that conflicts and divisiveness show up as well. So I would say rather just investigating specifically what's happening in their regions, to take it outside of the issue that they might feel and understand how that's connected to broader global issues. I will say that though those dialogues can be challenging at time, and so I just want to get a little bit granular on something that it's not just young people figuring out how to have those conversations on their own. It's about really preparing the educator, the facilitator, the adult who's in the room to really support these young people as they're having those difficult conversations. But again, before you can just jump into that really hard conversation, you have to understand the person that you're talking to. You have to have empathy for who they are, so that when they're sharing their perspective with you and they're sharing for you what they're experiencing, you really want to take that in, and you don't want to immediately come with, well, this is right or this is wrong. So I think that I just think it's really important that we recognize it has to start with an individual relationship and a recognition of empathy for that person and the issues that they might be encountering. But sometimes those issues seem so far away, I would say, and that's, again, another beauty of what we do at the STEAMS Initiative. It kind of takes these issues that seem global, and because you're hearing firsthand from someone in a virtual exchange what that issue was like, it's not just an issue you're hearing about it, you're hearing it connected to the person who's impacted by that. And I think, again, that's building on the human connection. And when we talk about global understanding and peace and prosperity, the most crucial part of that is that people to people connections are being built, and people begin to see themselves as friends and colleagues rather than adversaries and strangers. And that's a part of why we do the work that we do,
And why
to bridge
young
that divide.
people?
Because they're the future.
Yeah.
They are the future. I mean, there are, billions of young people in the world, and half of them probably say that they don't know what they're going to do next in life. They don't feel really ill prepared to get a job. Like, where am I going? Or there's that spectrum who say, I'm super confident. I know what I'm doing. You have some who are like us. We just go through the motions sometimes. We're just human.
Figuring it out.
We're just figuring out as we go. And some who are so disconnected, no matter, that's like a spectrum of young people, but no matter where you fall on that spectrum, young people need to be engaged. They must be engaged because they're going to shape and influence what our future is like. It is our responsibility. It's why we do what we do. And I would just say, the more that we can do to support them now on this journey, to give them the skills that they need so they can have these difficult conversations and feel empowered to be global problem solvers, the better our future will be. So that's where everyone needs to focus on young people, because that's where we are. The rising generation, that's where we're going to put our attention. And that's where, I'll be honest, that's where the world needs to focus on too. Let's bring in their voices, bring in their perspectives, and let's do it now. Let's create the better future we want right now. It doesn't have to be something in 25 years. We can make those changes now.
And what do you hope these young participants walk away from when they finish the program? You've talked a lot about the individualization of the program, that opportunity it provides. But because it's on an individual basis, is there a broad theme that the goal is that they all walk away with?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's such a good question. I mean, I think we want every young person to know that their voice matters. We also want young people to know that their voice matters even more in community, and that they have the ability to take action and make change as global citizens of the world and within their own communities. I mentioned the individual a lot because in order for change to actually take place in the world, a young person really needs to know that they have value and they have purpose. And you can find that value and purpose by talking with someone who's very different than you, has a different way of living, a different view on life, because they help draw out parts of you that you didn't even know exist. So that's why I start with the individual. But the goal is that when you really know who you are as a young person and what you want to do and how you want to show up, you can work with others then who feel similarly, feel differently, have a different perspective to make that change happen. So that's when you're change makers, you have control, and we as the world want to support you on that journey.
And so then just to wrap things up, I guess, what does the future look like? Talking about the future, what is the future for the Stevens Initiative? What can we expect the program to be and be doing 5-10 years down the line?
I mean, we want, and we will make it happen. Virtual exchange will be a part of every young person's educational journey. And when I say educational journey, I don't mean necessarily formally in the sense of a classroom, but journey to adulthood. That's where we want to see the Stevens Initiative grow in the next 10 years. I would say as conversations continue around artificial intelligence and personalized learning, I think we're going to see virtual exchange and what it provides a framework of how to have good online engagement, how to communicate with each other, how to collaboratively problem solve together. As the world begins to see how interconnected we are, virtual exchange will be a necessity for everyone. Everyone will need to have the framework and the values of what virtual exchange is, which is to come together as the world and create that world that we want is more peaceful, more understanding, and is a place that everybody can prosper in. So we'll be everywhere.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see you everywhere. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Thank
nice
you.
speaking with you.
Likewise, thank you.